My name is Madhav Grover. I'm the co-head of Talk Team at WIF, and today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Charu Sharma, and he's currently the director of Pro Kabaddi League. Prior to this, he has managed the Royal Challengers Bangalore team for the Indian Premier League. He started his sportcasting career in 1982 with the 9th Asian Games for the National Network of India and carried out to become the most respected multi-sports television commentator and anchor of the country. The voice of Indian sports, he continues to work as a freelance sports anchor, commentator, sports management professional, and voiceover artist. He regularly hosts award shows, corporate events, and lectures on teamwork and leadership. It's an honor for us to have you here, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Yeah.
I know that your students and your colleagues are spread, I don't know, maybe around the world right now, but certainly in parts of England. So thank you so much for getting through. A big special thanks to the granddaughter of my friend, Anand Dadu, and also to Sana for all the communication that she was involved with the past few weeks. And thank you, of course, Madhav, for doing this today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And basically, sir, first question will be on your journey from being a sports commentator and even before to managing one of the major Indian sports league, which is the Pro Kabaddi League. So how was your journey, sir?
Well, Madhav, you have to be a little careful about what you ask because most of these are very long stories. And I don't think we have the time for this. Maybe when we meet together at Warwick in the future, we can have a longer chat about this. But, you know, my journey has been all about sport. I mean, to those who may not be interested in sport, it might sound very boring, but it has been very single-minded because much before the 1982 Asian Games that you mentioned, which, yes, was the start of my broadcasting career, I was a regular sort of major sportsman, my forte being springboard diving, but you know, all that's history now, but that was in the 70s. So sport was always very, very close to me, and that's who I think I still am. I mean, one of my usual cliches is that any sport, anywhere, anytime, and also that I was and am and will hopefully ever remain a sportsman. So you can imagine how closely connected I am to that. So, of course, you know, in the 70s, when I was at the peak of my competitive sporting career, if you can call it that, it was rather short. Actually, not too short. It started very early. I was the junior national diving champion, springboard diving champion, when I was just about 11. You know, so that's starting very early. And all the rest of the training and everything else that goes with top-level sport was very much a part of me. And but even in cricket, which now, of course, in India and most places around the world, a lot of people will consider as a major source of livelihood. But in the 70s, no sport in India could earn you a livelihood. So sports was never going to be a livelihood career, if you know what I mean. And I knew that pretty early. What it could take you to is some level of employment in some of these government agencies, whether it's the railways or the services or the police or, you know, other such organizations. Not so much the corporate sector at that point of time. And I mean no disrespect. I think, you know, all these organizations have done fantastically for assisting sport in India or sports persons in India by offering them employment at various stages. But that wasn't for me. I went through some regulation schooling in college and what have you, and was then involved in the corporate sector because, as I said, you couldn't make a living through sport. And so as far as my diving career is concerned, I had to retire at the ripe old age of 19. And then followed a corporate career where it was in the tea trade earlier and later in tobacco, British American Tobacco, one of the affiliates in India, which is a bit of a disconnect, isn't it? But more on that later. And I had to carry that on for about 10 years from, say, 79, 80 to 1990 when I finally left the corporate job, career and everything else. But in the middle, because of the 1982 Asian Games, and of course that time in India, there was only one channel, the national channel. So there was a lot of work for those who like to do that kind of work, and Doordarshan, the channel, did seem to like a lot what I did on television. So they used me for a lot of assignments, and the companies that I worked with were actually happy to let me go on leave, on paid leave, and do these assignments, which was very kind and generous of them. So in a sense, my parallel broadcasting career actually did rather well in the 80s when there was only one channel, a lot of visibility and, you know, experience and stuff. In the early 90s, as you may know, there was a major change in the economics of India, or the commercial sense of it, with the liberalization, globalization situation that you may have read about or known.
Yes.
And that gave rise to a whole lot of independent or private channels to come to our part of the world. And of course, some of them happen to be sports channels. They happen to see all the work that I've done, and they said, would you like to work with us directly? And so that's when broadcasting actually became a livelihood for me in the early 90s. And I dropped everything else. So in many ways, sorry to be a little immodest, but only being factual, I was the first professional commentator in India because I did nothing else. I didn't have any other job or any other level of sustenance, only sport on television. And it carried on, which meant a lot of experience, a lot of sort of global exposure to the world of sport, which was all my area, my arena. So I enjoyed every bit of it. And of course, not that the IPL was the first league in India. There are many other leagues before that. There were hockey leagues, there were football leagues, there were other leagues as well. So it's not that all of a sudden India woke up to the concept of a league, because sporting leagues have been around in the world for ages, decades, almost 100 years. But that's how my career kind of then morphed a bit, where I was always into sports management as well, and or should I say into just about every angle of sport, as a player, as somebody who talks about it, as somebody who organizes it, and somebody who was involved in the management of teams and so on and so forth. So I mean, I could go on, but as you can imagine now, it is already a life that's just been fully dedicated to sport. I've kind of dived very deep. I was a diver. And, sports is very kind to me too. So it's been a wonderful relationship.
I think that's an amazing story, sir. I mean, you forged a way for a lot of people to follow, being the first sports commentator. It's amazing.
One hopes, one hopes.
So, sir, carrying forward to this theme, I would ask you, how do you think has the Indian sports industry evolved over the years? Especially looking at the growth of not just the Indian Premier League, but the Indian Soccer League and Pro Kabaddi League and various other leagues which have now been popping up. How do you think the growth has come?
Okay, another question that can take about 4 days to answer that. Let's go with it. As a relatively new nation now, all of us have to realize, Madhav, that India is still a relatively new nation, only 75 years old or so. And the first 10, 20, 30 years were steeped in poverty and many other pressing problems that were far, far more important than seeking achievement in the world of sport. So in terms of sport, we were even much later in terms of the start, maybe 60s or 70s, when some kind of attention started being given to sport. And at that stage, not only was the Indian government young, but even Indian industry was very young. You can imagine lots of new projects taking off and new enterprise. So the support to sport was very minimal. For the government, as you can imagine, Madhav, there were many, many priorities then over the world of sport. It still remains. I mean, sports has become something that the government is paying a little more attention to now, but 50s, 60s, 70s, sports was very distant thought for people in the government, saying sport, yeah, well, the kids can go out and play a bit in the mud and come back, that's fine. But we can't pay attention to it because there's so many other pressing problems, food, water, housing, etc., etc. And therefore, sports took very long to take off in India. But now, without doubt, the glass is half full. The government's doing a lot more because perhaps our country is in a more stable position. And even as I say that, I realize that there's still a very large number of poor people in India. I think that's still a huge problem. And well, it's not an easy one to lick. I mean, we're not a country such as Singapore, which is like one little dot in India where, things can be so easily managed. But our vastness and our varied kind of population and demographics and everything else is a very difficult problem. Anyway, so sport is certainly in a much better space thanks to the government now. But equally importantly, I think there has been a realization in terms of the corporate sector that sport is a vibrant, exciting arena, something that corporate, brands and various companies are happy to support. And that happiness, of course, is still in a very infant age, but more and more support did come in from the corporate sector in terms of sponsorship, because a large part of what sport is in the world is because of the fact that there's sponsorship of various companies and brands that takes it forward. For without money, of course, where would it all be? I think also eventually a lot of people realize that the improvement in the standard of sport has a lot to do with the concept of professionalism in that sport. Now, you might find a lot of sports persons in India still saying something like, oh, well, I'd like to, win a medal for the country and I don't really play for the money. But what they're really saying is that, can somebody please reward me for my hard work, my blood, sweat, and tears? And that's where professional leagues play a very big part, Madhav, because they then reward you for your hard work, and they make it a source of livelihood. Now, we all know that sports has a very short career, generally speaking. Most sports have a very compressed career. You can play for what, 4, 5, 6, 10 years at the top, no more. But one has to maximize the income at that point of time, because you spend so much time and effort in increasing your standard in that sport. You need to be compensated. Professional leagues do that. They compensate and make it a source of livelihood, giving those who play at the highest level at that point of time not only their sustenance, the money, but also it is a huge aspirational thing, Madhav, where the sport spreads hugely. What's the word that I was looking for? Anyway, and encourages many more to then excel in sport, because they see a small pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And that aspiration provided through professional leagues is very important for the growth and development of sport. India now is maybe still at an infancy stage, but we're doing better in that sense.
That's a very enlightening talk, sir. I must say, it broadens my horizon, personally speaking, when it comes to sports. And I'm sure.
Let me interrupt you to take also give a little due, or should we say focus on the fact that the government too, as I mentioned, is doing a little more of a sport. But the realization needs to be stronger in the government ranks that sport is actually a huge international soft power.
Yes.
And all governments could use that, because achievement in sport cuts across all barriers and borders and what have you. And if a country is strong in sport, I think people around the world actually appreciate it. Suppose, for instance, as say Hungary was very good in football, they're also fabulous in water polo and many other sports. I think if there's a Hungarian team in town for water polo, you say, oh, wow, yeah, I've heard of that. To take a funny example, my best example in that case is, of course, and this is a question for you, Madhav, do you know who, each country is run by several very important people. One of the more important people, of course, who handles the budget of the whole country. There's an old example, by the way, so if you've heard of it, I do beg your pardon. But do you know, Madhav, and please don't look at Google right now, who is probably the most powerful man in Jamaica, their finance minister? Do you know his name?
No, sir.
Okay, he virtually runs the country. However, do you know who is the fastest man on earth?
Yes, sir. Usain Bolt.
And where's he from? Where's he from?
Jamaica.
Right. So, if you know what I mean.
Yes, now I
sports persons who achieve a lot, do a lot for their country by making people more aware and just uplifting the image of that country. And so therefore, all governments need to realize that sport is a very important area internationally. And I think the Indian government will gradually continue to realize that, but I hope they do quickly.
So adding to your soft power stance, I also believe this wholeheartedly, that India should increase its soft power through sports. I think India has done fantastically when it comes to cricket, but there are so many other sports like hockey, like kabaddi, like soccer, where Indians can actually do much, much, much better, and Indian government should look into it as a soft power. I think that is a very important statement which has been made.
Correct.
So moving forward to this theme again, can the
sorry, second interruption, but I beg your pardon.
No problem.
There are sports and there are sports. As you mentioned cricket, you mentioned hockey, many others, football. Now, all these sports came to India through other countries. They're all sports that were born in other countries. And yes, every country has a right to do well in any sport, regardless of whether it's their sport or not. But it is equally, if not more important, for countries to ensure that their own, if they do happen to have their own unique heritage, ancient sport, to make sure that that too benefits. Because, otherwise you keep adopting these sports from other nations, that's okay. What about who's going to promote your own sport? For instance, say a sport like judo, and if we can claim that it came from Japan, has done so well internationally. It's been a long-established member of the Olympics and so on and so forth. If Japan didn't push it, let me assure you, it would still have been lying around some darkness somewhere. And therefore, when we get to kabaddi later, this connect I want you to remember about countries taking their own sport forward and pushing it into the international arena and making more people aware of it and giving it respect, which is the key word.
Extremely important, sir. I cannot agree more. And Another question I wanted to ask basically on this theme again was with regard to the Indian sports industries and comparing it to overseas. I think some sort of that comparison has already been made, like you said about judo. That was basically my question on if we can compare, if we see the likes of the NBA, the NFL in America, if we see the likes of the Euro Cup and UEFA Cup overseas again. So can our Indian sport leagues become as big as they are right now internationally?
Without question. Why not? And I'm not being ultra nationalistic. I'm just stating what could be a fact. Just to remember that time and patience is something that the younger generation may not understand too much about. And I mean no disrespect. But patience is very important, Madhav, because when you talk about all the rest of the leagues, they've enjoyed decades, 50, 60, 70, 80 years of existence. And they're also parts of countries which are, should we say, first world countries, where, I mean, they are highly developed countries. So there's a lot of commercial support that goes to many things, including, of course, sport. Because if that level of commercial support is not provided to any league or whatever, it will stay where it will stay. But the commercial circles need to keep increasing, keep increasing, keep increasing. And that happens when a league is vibrant, robust, is well looked after, the governance is good, and of course, it catches the media attention. So yes, all leagues in India have scope for becoming, globally renowned, acknowledged, huge leagues. Especially, of course, cricket. Even though very few countries play it, but we do now boast of the biggest, most vibrant, most commercially successful cricket league in the world. Similarly, of course, the Pro Kabaddi League. I mean, you can't say that, no, actually, I like the Dutch Kabaddi League, or hang on, maybe the South African Kabaddi League. No, the Pro Kabaddi League is the biggest Kabaddi league in the world. So the leagues that India is spawning, if they have what could be called the higher standard of the game in the world, they are likely to do very well because, they are the apex league in that sport. And that counts for a lot because it's not like league number 42 or league number 64 in terms of standards. They offer the highest standards of that sport seen around the world. That is a sure recipe for eventual success and global renown.
Very interesting to hear, sir. I feel the same, sir, that Indian sports leagues can become, if they are not already on the path, they are. I think they are on the path, to be very honest, but they will, I think, one day even surpass many other international leagues. We have seen exponential growth in very less amount of years, and I think that will happen very soon also. So, sir, what are the major concerns which are faced by the Indian sports industry today, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Well, if you talk about today, of course, we're dealing with this huge pandemic problem. So I'm going to park that aside for a while. But if you're talking about these times, as in the last few years or whatever, there's no doubt in my mind that the government is probably doing in India as much as it can, given the resources, because the resources, of course, need to go to many other very, very important areas. If you go to the finance ministry, you'll find hundreds of files, and in one file, there's a sporting request for the volleyball team to go to Brazil and for, say, a four-nation tournament. And there are 500 files saying that drought in one area, 10,000 dead in some other area, flood in some other area or whatever, where so many resources need to go. Every time there's a calamity, states ask for 20,000 crores or whatever. I mean, where does all this money come from? The government has to be very careful that it cannot overspend on sport. And I say that myself, despite the fact that I would like the world of sports to be granted a massive budget, but I realize the problems in India at this point of time. So the government is probably doing enough in terms of its grants and the money. But where the government, for instance, let's take there are many sides of the coin here, but I mean, let's take the two main sides of the coin which support sport. One is the government. I think they're doing enough. Where they can do more is public-private partnership. Not only for all the stadia that have been built by the various state governments and the central government, which definitely need public-private support for optimal usage, and therefore leading to better maintenance, but also the release of land for sporting projects, for sporting academies, particularly higher performance academies, because they require that level of, say, real estate. Now, what is the biggest detriment to these sporting projects in India? Real estate. So the government, which of course is the biggest owner of real estate in India, want to say, okay, any worthwhile project for a high performance academy of any sport, we will support by granting the land. And whoever's organizing that or building or conducting that high performance academy or organizing it can get support from everybody else in terms of all the rest of the things required. But the land the government can give, because land is just lying around, use it for heaven's sake for the world of sport. Because, I mean, it does do a lot for nation building. And that partnership, I think the government needs to do more about. Sure, some checks and balances need to be put in, that there's no misuse of that land, doesn't turn out to be some pub or whatever, it needs to be a high performance academy. And secondly, of course, the corporate sector, because that's the second area where money must come from. In India, Madhav, the corporate sector is still relatively new. I know some companies doing very well, but there's still a period of consolidation. People want to see more and more money lying with them, you know, to use an old cliche, in the mattress. You know, I can see it every day. Oh, it's there. Shareholders also, you know, tend to get a little upset when you start spending on other things. But the corporate sector in India, especially the homegrown corporate sector, I think the major multinational brands do a fair amount, but the homegrown corporate sector needs to be a little more aware of the nation building aspect of sport, and therefore the need to support sporting activities with better budgets. Because many corporate sector people still tell me, you know, where's the ROI if I sponsor sport? I'm saying it's not because of the ROI. It's really nation building. I mean, it should be NBI, Nation Building Index. That's important. And if the companies realize that, I'm sure that more and more funds will get to sport. And thirdly, of course, the organizational aspect of sport. I think there are many people in India now, or maybe multinational companies as well, who have the capacity and the capability to plan, to conceive, and to build major, say, sporting facilities and or high performance academies. But the level of support they need from the government, two from the corporate sector, both need to step up. And you know, the standard of sport in India will be directly related to more such academies and infrastructure and facilities coming up, for which both the government and the corporate sector need to enhance their realization of the importance of sport for a nation. But again, I say patience. It will happen. It'll just take a little more time in a country such as India.
Yeah, I completely agree, sir. And I feel that the nation building aspect is also very important in sports. When it comes to sports, people tend to forget that it is not just about soft power, or it's just not about the sportsman spirit. It's also about the nation building aspect and how it basically binds and grows the nation.
And the additional aspect, Madhav, thank you for agreeing. You feel free to disagree as well.
Yes, sir.
I think the other important aspects are also the health, literally the health of a nation, and very little can compete with the concept of bettering health than the world of sport. Now, you don't have to become a champion, but if you follow sport, if you do some kind of sport, if you play some kind of sport, I think the nation, you know, any country, any area is likely to be healthier, because it does lead to fitness. Fitness being one of the most important early aspects of trying to achieve anything in any sport. So if you are more and more involved with the world of sport, one tends to be more and more fit or more healthy. And ultimately, that's fantastic for a nation. So there's that benefit as well. You don't always have to be an Olympic gold medal winner, but if you're involved in the world of sport, you're likely to be more healthy, you're likely to be more fit, and you're likely to realize how much sport really means for you. So later, if you become the MD of a company or marketing manager or whatever, you say, oh, hang on, I value sports a great deal. I think I benefit a great deal from it, and I'm happy to support sport in a larger sense.
Yes, I completely agree. That's why I think the government has been also pushing the Fit India movement, and then there was also in America with the previous the previous First Lady Michelle Obama also saying "Get up and start America" or some initiative like that, which involved people going out to play sports. I think that I completely agree that it makes people fitter, and it is a very nice way to tackle a lot of health problems which we face in the youth today. It's very true, sir. So, sir, another question I wanted to ask is, how was your time from a sports commentator different from managing an IPL cricket team, which was RCB, and then different from directing a major sports league, which is the Pro Kabaddi? How are these things different?
Here's your next week-long answer question. But, you know, to be a commentator in the world of sport is such a pleasing thing. I mean, I enjoy myself hugely every time I get an assignment. It's such a lovely thing to be sitting around watching sport at the highest level and to have the luxury to be talking about it. Hopefully some people are listening as well. So that is just a very pleasurable activity. Yes, you have to work hard at your knowledge of the sport that you want to talk about, as well as the language that you're expressing yourself in. Both are very important ingredients being a good commentator. And some people tend not to work hard at both. I must confess, I mean, I'm very modest about this. I work very hard on both to make sure that if you are commentating, and of course it's a visible, audible kind of world out there for commentators, then you must make a difference. Otherwise, but I'll do something else. So that's a very easy world, a pleasurable world, a happy world, and you meet some wonderful people and you have a great time. But sports management, of course, is fraught with all sorts of, entrepreneurial difficulties. Like any other enterprise, there are so many aspects to manage, from the finance to the marketing of it to the event organization and personnel management, hiring, and so on and so forth. So that is much more complicated. I've enjoyed it just as much because there's a sense of creation. As a commentator, Madhav, you can imagine, much as I love it, but you're still, in a sense, a spectator, just a sort of a, if I can use a horrible word for it, one's a parasite. You're clipping onto something that's already going on. But to create something is fantastic. To think of an event, to then make it actually happen, get all the support required, that's magnificent as an independent event manager, which I have done as well. Then, of course, you talk about the bigger leagues where one tends to be perhaps an important cog, but a cog of a very large wheel, like one was with the IPL. I was very fortunate to be involved with the very first season of the IPL. And I say fortunate because that's when all the hard work was done to make the league happen the first year. Thereafter, of course, it gets on track and it goes on track and it becomes a little easier to manage. I'm not saying that, it's a piece of cake, but it becomes easier. The first season, as you can imagine, the first time is always more difficult. And I'm glad to have been involved with that because all the difficulties, all the challenges were all faced by me and the rest of my colleagues and other teams as well. We faced all of that and understood what it takes, and our timelines were brutally short. So it was a wonderful experience, but also very stressful. And for me personally, it turned out to be a bit of a bad memory because my association with RCB came to a very forgettable early halt. So, but let's not talk about that. I feel petty when I do still. But it did give me a lot of experience about trying to, create and conceive and manage a bigger sporting event. And when the opportunity finally came up to try and do something for our own homegrown, unique heritage sport of kabaddi, that experience was certainly very useful for me.
It's very interesting to hear, sir. I think the Pro Kabaddi League is actually very fantastic. My favorite team is the Pink Panthers. Although I'm from Delhi, but I would just like to put it here, like I always watch their games. I don't remember the player names because I'm not that good in kabaddi, but I love to.
That's okay.
It's a very
experience. The Bachchans will be very happy to hear that. And Abhishek, I'm grateful to all the team owners who came forward, particularly in the early years. But Abhishek's presence is very important because he brought in a very important aspect to the visibility, apart from the sport, of who are the owners and what are they from and what's going on. Because I always maintain that the sport is why people watch. 95 to 98% of the people watch the sport because of the inherent excitement and visual appeal of the sport. And yes, there are 2, 3, 4% who might be, always not more concerned, but more aware of who the owners are and what the rest of the ecosystem is around that sport. But ultimately, more than 95% of the viewership is really due to the nature of the sport and the quality of competition. But yeah, I will be grateful to Abhishek and all the rest of the team owners as well for in a sense, jumping into the void, the dark void with me. It's like, can you take that leap of faith with me? And they did, so I'm very grateful. Because as you can imagine, Madhav, the Pro Kabaddi League's done excessively well and, by the grace of God. But those early years were extremely testing and trying. And it's just that I did 100% believe in the fact that it would do well. Nobody else did, but that's okay. That's what a pioneering effort is all about. And our company is called Mashal Sports, as in, the light that takes you through the darkness of, various situations in a pioneering sense. And I'm glad that eventually everything worked out just the way I thought it would be. Of course, there's still many challenges, but it's done very well to be India's second most watched sport from day one in 2014.
Yes, sir. I believe, sir, that the Pro Kabaddi League has actually done exponentially well. When it started, I felt that, okay, there's a new sport coming in, what to do and how it will pan out. But I found it extremely exciting. And I, as an individual, didn't know a lot about kabaddi. I had played it in school, but not that much. But it was actually very interesting. And then I remember when I went to university, we used to play pro kabaddi. We should try to play it because of pro kabaddi. It was actually
Well,
very
I'm so glad to hear that, because a lot of people did tell me, for instance, why don't you try and popularize it more around the country before you do the league? I said, well, if I try and do that in schools and what have you, I'll be 20,000 years old before I can complete all the schools. So it's a top-down effect. It's called a trickle-down effect, that you do something really well at the top, and the trickle-down effect does take place. And thankfully, a lot of schools, institutions, colleges, clubs were all, and still are, very keen to start their own kabaddi programs. So that trickle-down effect is very real, only because we are at the highest level, which is the Pro Kabaddi League, trying to do as good a job as we can in terms of not just the standard of the sport, which is the highest in the world. So you can't argue with that. Like I said earlier, you can't say, no, I'm happy to watch the Argentinian league. I mean, there isn't any, and the Pro Kabaddi League is the biggest and best in the world. But also, because the sport itself it gives rise to fabulous fitness. I mean, these guys are super athletes. And I've forgotten a couple of points I wanted to make, but yeah, it just is something that seems to have, thankfully, many things need to make something successful. And I think one of the things that may have made the Pro Kabaddi League as successful as it is, and hopefully will continue to be, is people like you, Madhav. Because a lot of youngsters in India, or various parts of the world, certainly India, had this new sense of, or neo-nationalism. I think a lot of the youngsters in India are far more, come on India, let's go India kind of thing. And kabaddi, of course, is that true blue Indian heritage sport, but it had somehow been ignored because it's ours anyway. To use a Hindi cliche, Ghar ki murgi dal baraba. I mean, it's our sport anyway, it was the big deal. And it wasn't quite given the level of attention by the media and others, and certainly not given the respect it deserved. But the Pro Kabaddi League actually brought that respect and attention back to our own true blue, sport, but thanks to people like you. And so I thank you and all your friends who watched and who made it successful. Because had we rejected our own sport and our own call in our own DNA to support what is ours, then it may not have been as spectacularly successful. It's a bit like saying, if I might ask you, Madhav, if you do like Indian food still, I presume, what's your all-time simple favorite Indian dish, food, whatever?
So prantha. Coming from
Paratha.
it has to be prantha.
You bet. Mine too, by the way, also is a
Yeah.
paratha. So it's a bit like saying, what's the big deal in a paratha? No. I think paratha is a terrible dish. Why don't I go for, some couscous or whatever? I mean, from some other nation. I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect. But, to not really value what is your own, to not appreciate it, not like it, was just, it didn't make me comfortable at all. Because before the Pro Kabaddi League, a lot of people were sort of just not appreciative of what is their own sport. It's like, oh, that's our own sport. What's the big deal? Let's go for something more glitzy and glamorous, which is from overseas. And I'm like saying, don't you want to respect what is your own? So in that sense, I'm truly grateful and glad that, kabaddi as our own Indian sport has not only enthralled and our own fans in India, but, many fans around the world as well. Nobody watches kabaddi. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people who watch kabaddi are sort of not enthused by it because it's a very magnetic sport. There's constant action. And it was just right to be brought into international consciousness again.
Okay, so adding to a question, this is a special bonus question. Basically, so what other Indian sport do you believe can have a major sporting league in India and be successful? I know a lot of them can be, but what is another sport which is Indian origin, homebred, which can become into a very major and gain the popularities with the likes of PKL?
Well, for starters, one has to clearly identify what is a true Indian heritage sport. Because, when past when I went around asking people, so what do you think is, the Indian national sport? So a lot of people say, oh, cricket. I'm saying, excuse me, you know where that came? Oh, yeah, that came from England. I say, yeah, well, then what's the true blue Indian national? Oh, hockey. Yeah. Why? Because we won all the Olympic medals. I say, but the sport came from the UK in the 1800s. Oh, really? And sometimes, of course, this would be their third choice. A lot of people did say wrestling. And I say, hang on. Do you think wrestling is a unique Indian sport? No, it was also in the Roman cultures, and the Greek cultures, and the other cultures of the world. They said, oh, yeah. And finally, of course, though I must say quite a few people did guess it, they said, kabaddi. I said, you bet. So that's, our sort of national sport. And we got to understand what are true Indian sports born out of India. And you could mention that polo was born out of India, and if you try and track it in terms of a heritage sport, but I mean, it requires too much infrastructure, and is not followed enough internationally. It's just there has too many entry barriers. So I mean, people even mentioned that because of the Brits, snooker was invented in India in Ooty, so that potentially could do very well. There have been some leagues planned, but maybe the arena is not big enough. Maybe it requires a hush. Maybe there isn't. It needs to be tweaked a bit. And to be fair, I think the Billiards and Snooker Federation is thinking of tweaking more and more. Already from 15 reds, it's come down to 6 reds as a sort of a T20 format. But I'm sure they'll tweak it a little more, ensure that the spectators have more fun and can shout along rather than shh. I mean, the minute you say shh to a sport, fans say, what? I mean, I'm supposed to be enjoying myself or what? So that has potential, and I'm very fond of it, by the way. I've done a lot of commentary too. Those snooker, billiards, stars of India are good friends of mine. Also, there's a possibility now, and people told me, "What? You've done the kabaddi? Why don't you do the Kho league as well?" But the essential difference is that kabaddi transported itself to become an international sport, because as you may or may not know, it became a part of the Asian Games, which is the second biggest games in the world, from 1990. So kabaddi had taken those important steps to organize itself better, to become more international, to have a better set of rules, and to be known in more countries, and so on and so forth. So, which is what I wanted to tap into, that it's already a sport that's acknowledged by many other nations. Why don't we start the preeminent league in terms of creating professionals of that sport? So Kho at this point of time hasn't really hit the consciousness of too many other nations, but within India, it certainly has a fair following and can do rather well in terms of viewership, because very large hinterland population of India would take to that sport pretty quickly. I don't know about the corporate support though, because corporations tend to just be a little shy to begin with, but I hope eventually that gets a bit of support. I can't think of too many others that may be vastly successful, but I'm willing to give you the next 20 seconds to tell me, what do you think?
I think it's a Kho, to be very honest. I used to play Kho a lot, and I think Kho
can there you go.
Way. And I was
there's a move on.
Yes, sir.
We'll see. Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily need to have to be involved, because I was stressed enough with the whole creation of the Kabaddi League, but other people, friends of mine, are doing it, and I wish them luck.
Yes, that's amazing. So now we'll be going towards the rapid fire questions. So, sir, when I say a following word, you can say the first word or the first sentence which comes into your mind. So, leaders is the first word.
Humility.
Society.
Cooperation.
Children.
Innocence and fun.
Education.
All around.
21st century skills.
Ones that don't have technology, computers.
And now, sir, a person who has influenced your work.
Well, I mean, what am I? Influenced my work in which area? Because I mean, the world of sport, that's all I've done, but sport has many angles. So I don't know, different people, I mean, many commentators whom I respect. So, I mean, that's one angle of mine. There's sports management. I think one needs to learn a lot from the global leaders in sports management, people like IMG and what have you. just the level of detail that one must get into is something that, I've learned over time, because I'm no natural entrepreneur or whatever. I just, I'm lucky to be in the arena that I so love and that I'm a part of, but I'm not as diligent or as entrepreneurial as many other people are. So yeah, I just value, I don't know whether you're going to ask me this later or not, but I might tell you now. I just value the concept of ethical living more than anything else. And if that is something that I'm following in every aspect of my life, I'm a happy man. And I don't like bigness. I don't like wealth. I don't like anything else which has even just an iota of suspicion of unethical behavior. Then I said, well, nothing is worth it. So for me, ethics, whatever that means to you, that word, or honesty, or words to that effect, are the biggest drivers of my life. And those people who are known to be reputed, highly reputed in this area, are people I look up to and will bow in front of all the time.
if you, one thing you would like to tell yourself 15 years ago.
Well, do your best to stay fit, because later, as in 15 years later now, all the injuries and everything else are going to come back and haunt you as they do now. So I wish I'd paid more attention to a higher level of fitness 15 years ago, but I was so busy running around that all of that's coming to haunt me now. This ache and that pain, this, that, and the other. Even today, I went for a physiotherapy session for one of my elbows. I got a golf elbow right now, so on and so forth. I think more attention on fitness, and certainly, I think I should have said that first, and I apologize to family. I think I did, in all my running around, because I've been running around all the time, I did not spend enough time or attention to build better relationships with my family. I've got two sons, one now 33 and 30 virtually. And I love them both to distraction, but I think my relationships could have been, I wish I'd spent more time on, I don't know whether it could have helped or not, but I wish I'd spent more time with them. But you can't have it all, Madhav. So,
The next question is, if you could add one course or subject which you could inculcate in the Indian education system, what would it be? It could be in terms of sports, but anything else also.
Philosophy, it's already there though, but I just want people to be better, independent thinkers. And if that can be done by philosophy or whatever else, how would you describe a subject which deals with essentially with independent thinking?
I couldn't agree more, sir. I myself have started reading about philosophy very late in life, which is after school. I felt that it should have.
It's not late in life. You're okay. You've got plenty of time. It's all right.
Non-Western, Western philosophers both have their own outlook, and I think it is very interesting to read. That's nice.
I'm glad you realize that, because we can't all be sheep.
Yes.
And it pains me when some kind of public opinion in the media or this, that, and the others followed blindly by people. I'm saying, can't you think for yourselves? Now, come on. So
yes, everybody has their own journey, and they have to find it. People tend to copy other people's journey and say that we will follow this and we'll reach here, but that doesn't work.
True.
I don't think, and that philosophy helps you to guide your brain.
There's only one king or emperor in that area, and it's called originality.
Yes.
So, and that comes through independent thinking, that comes from realizing, may I take 30 seconds to push on you my favorite lecture? So 30 seconds only. One of the most difficult things to do, Madhav, and to all of you listening, is to realize who I am, who one is, and you may think very easy for me to sit here now and say, you may think who you are, but it's so difficult, Madhav, for people to really, truly, deeply, be brutally honest with themselves and say, okay, I think this is what I am. And of course, that could change, with circumstances, with time, with experiences, but to constantly be aware of who I am, I think is one of the biggest skills that people can acquire for themselves, because that then dictates what you do in life. Rather than be confused about who I am, then you follow all sorts of different things which sometimes are good for you, sometimes are not good for you. And I mean, even with good friends and company, if you can stand alone and say, listen, you guys all want to do this, great. I don't, because I don't like it. Now, very few people have that kind of self-awareness. And can you create it, or can you organically, or at least the awareness should be there that I should continue to try and really know who I am. For instance, I know, confession time, I'm not hugely industrious. I'm quite happy to have a lot of downtime, and I value my downtime. And I don't get sucked into the fact that, you need to work harder. I'm saying, that's not me. So why should I go against the grain, against the tide all the time? And you may say that you must have a dream and follow it, but you really need to know who you are. I can give you several examples of, what one may not be, what one may think I am, but, cannot be. So that brutal honesty about who, what am I really, I think does help people lead a less stressful life. And ultimately, I think many of the goals in life need to come into that one point saying, I need to keep stress off my life. How do you do that? By knowing who you are.
Very interesting, sir. Very interesting indeed. And what is a recent milestone you have achieved?
Well, you mean apart from, the Shashti Purti, as they call in India, I'm over 60 years old now. So a couple of years ago, I turned 60. I think that's a pretty decent milestone to achieve for whatever it's worth. But I'm not into milestones here. One milestone is that I'm still single digit handicap in golf. That's a pretty good milestone to have. That's because the last few months, I haven't worked much. So I've spent a lot of time on the golf course and improved my golf. What have I achieved? I'm actually I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of different friends. I have my tennis friends and my golf friends and my other friends and my whatever friends. So milestone, you said. I don't I suppose you have to have a goal for a milestone. I don't know. I lead such a carefree, easy life that milestones, I may not even recognize them if they're lying around me. So that's not my style. I have to admit though that I spent a lot of time, effort, energy, attention, etc., in creating the Pro Kabaddi League, along with Anand Mahendra, of course, was my co-founder, and who initially said, "Why don't we do a league?" When I was pushing him to say, "Hey, listen, do something in the world of kabaddi. It's going to sort of really do well," and he said, "Well, why don't we do a league because the IPL has started now?" All those are very long stories, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But just to be able to get it going, to create something new. Not the fact that it has been fabulously successful or will continue to be, but the fact that we could mount it and put it there in an immodest moment. I think that's a wonderful service to the world of sport. But so maybe that's a good milestone to have crossed.
Very interesting. So the last question is basically a small message you would like to give the youth or the viewers of this episode.
Watch what you ask for. My message may not be short, but no. But hey, listen, I do. I don't waste my words. I do try and say what I mean, and I do. I believe completely that the world is in your hands. People who are 18, 20, 25, 28, 30, because the kind of energy that you people have and new thought and new ideas is going to drive this world for the next, whatever, 50, 100 years. And therefore, who am I to advise you guys on anything? But I would like to just offer my own formula very quickly. The first thing is, information. And it may be out there in the internet somewhere in one of my lectures, but I'll say it again anyway. See, I have my own formula, information is very important. And all of you now have access to incredible amounts of information. And what that does, Madhav, it makes you believe that you know, because you've read. No, there's nothing very wrong about reading and therefore being well informed. So that's an I. But you need to add many other aspects to it, because I alone, as an information alone, can lead you to all sorts of mistakes as well, because how much information can one have? And little information is destructive. So you add, or you do a plus sign and do E, which is experience. You do I plus E, and then you're talking about, that's now making a bit of sense, because you've got experience as well. You've read it, and you experienced it, you've actually done it, you walked that talk or whatever. I think then you're getting into a better path. And I plus E is actually equal to K, which is knowledge, because information is not knowledge, but information plus experience is knowledge. And I just want all of you to absorb this, because this is the journey of the eventual alphabet, which you'll get to. So I plus E is equal to K, but you still need to add a little more. You need to add another E, which is exposure. So if you talk about information and experience and exposure, because you could be at one point, one room all your life, getting a fair amount of experience, but not the exposure. The wider the exposure, the more the quality of that knowledge and learning. And so all of you need a huge width in terms of exposure, because then the more you see, the more you visit, the more you go, the more you meet, the more you realize how little you know. So I think that realization is also important. Keeps arrogance away. And all of these letters, I plus E, etc., equals to the big letter of all. And which is the letter that all of us hopefully should be leading our lives with. And that alphabet, the final equals to, is, I'm not going to play games with you, I'll just give it to you right here, but otherwise it could take some time, is W. And W, of course, is our life direction, is the director of our life. And that W, of course, Madhav, is, I'll give you 3 seconds.
Wealth.
Sorry, we differ completely. No, wisdom.
Wisdom.
Okay?
Yes.
Yes. So, which could be inversely proportional to wealth, but that's okay. Wisdom. And I think, this wisdom, this thing, I mean, you can't see, feel, touch it, can you? I mean, what is wisdom? But it's a combination of all these other alphabets that I've mentioned, of information, of experience, of exposure, of learning, of knowledge, so on and so forth. And all of that leads to wisdom. And all of us have different levels of wisdom at different times of our life. And it's a constantly improving situation. Nobody is wise, and that's it. You keep gaining wisdom as you go. So even wisdom, once you have it, and you feel you have it, what should that lead to? And those are my final words for all my young friends who are listening. Wisdom then becomes our guide in 2 very important areas. One, of course, is if it can lead you into an understanding or a realization of the wiser I am, the more I know, the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know, then I think it's leading you to good spaces. Secondly, of course, if the wiser you are, the more you learn, the more you know, the more, if it's leading you into a realization of the less I should be judging because I know so little, I think that's a wonderful space to be in, because all of us tend to be so incredibly and stupidly judgmental in our lives. It's a very limiting concept to be judgmental. The wiser one person gets, the less judgmental one person should get, because, what do you really know about the situation, about the other person, about anything? And that frees your mind up from being narrow and judgmental into being wider and more accepting of everything, accepting of different people, of different cultures, of different language, of different everything, different food. There is no, I like this and this is it, and you're stupid to not like it. No, I mean, just the relaxed spiritual freedom of, that person, that thing, it's all okay, it's all good. That's one message. Second, positivity, Madhav, is a very big one for me. I think a lot of the younger people now, because of the different kind of stresses people go through, might be distressed or depressed at various levels. And I just want to keep that away from young minds in India and the rest of the world, where negative thoughts are deliberately kept away. Can you train yourself to do that? Maybe you can. Just the level of positivity never should dip. It only increase. The belief in the world, your trust in the world, this whole positive aspect is very important for keeping stress away from thriving. So think about that. And maybe add a few more words like patience and honesty and ethical behavior and what have you. So no more lecture.
So I think it's been a very inspirational talk. I feel anybody and everybody who watches this episode is going to be inspired by you. You are an amazing speaker.
I hope so, Madhav. And you're too kind and too generous. But I will say this, that, some word, some phrase, something that may stick with somebody in their mind about our chat today. And if it inspires you or helps you, just know who you are or do better in life, I will be a very grateful human being.
That's an amazing thought again, sir. Very nice. Very kind of you to basically lend us your time and come to the Warwick India Forum's first episode of Vichaar this season. I think it's a very great start indeed to this season. And I hope to see you soon again at Warwick India Forum for some event.
Well, I certainly hope so, Madhav. So, this is not the end of it.
Yes, this is not the end.
But thank you so much, Madhav, for sparing your time. And of course, please thank Sana, who was in touch, and my young Dadu friend, the granddaughter of my friend Anand. All right. And I wish you all the very best. Stay strong, stay positive. This too shall pass, this dark time.
Thank you, sir.